If you want to learn how to assemble a Veddha V3C open air mining rig case, it's called a Minercase 6 GPU version, and you don't really know where to start, kind of like I don't with the name of this thing, you've come to the right channel. We're going to go step by step, in detail, and we're going to start right after this. Welcome back to the Savage Mind YouTube channel. I'm Charles, and if this is your first time here and you're interested in building a cryptocurrency mining rig and other crypto related stuff, please be sure to click subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. So this is video number 2 in a 4-part series where I take you through a complete cryptocurrency mining rig build from start to finish. In the last video, we decided what we were going to buy. We looked online, we looked for some prices, we went through a spreadsheet, I showed you how to calculate everything, we went through power, we went through everything. So if you need to check out that video, do it up here because that's where you'll find out how we got to this point. There'll be links in the description to the other videos in this series, so if you need to jump around a bit, be sure to check those out as well. And I want to know in the comments below what your favorite mining rig frame is. Also, let me know if it's dumb that I want the mining rig to look nice, because I think that's what kind of sets hobby miners apart from farm type miners. People with a lot of GPUs, is they don't really care what it looks like. But in our build, because it's one of our first builds, or might be your first build, we want it to look nice. So that's where this frame comes in, this open air frame. Because I think it looks nice, and there you go. I think it's got kind of a mechanical look to it. So I don't know, I just like it. So let's get right into putting this thing together so that we can press on with this build. We're going to start by unboxing the frame and laying the parts out in a really organized manner so that we can put this thing together pretty quick. There's a lot of people online that complain about how long it takes to put this frame together. The instructions say, or not the instructions, but the vendor says that you're supposed to be able to put it together in about 15 minutes. I don't know, I mean, maybe 25 minutes. But there are some little caveats to this thing that can really increase the amount of time it takes to put it together. So I'm gonna go through the steps. We're gonna do it quickly, and let's get started. Okay, so to get started building the Veddha V3C 6 GPU rig frame, open air rig frame, pretty much all you need is a pair of scissors to cut these straps off, because after that everything that you need is in the case. So we're going to use what comes with the case. I mean, you could use your own tools and stuff, but it comes with everything you need. So let's go ahead and crack this baby open. So the only tools you're going to need for this build are the Phillips head screwdriver, a small nut driver. I don't know the size of it. This is kind of optional because this is for the motherboard standoffs, which you can kind of tighten with your hand anyway, so it's not really that big of a deal. And then you got 3 small Allen wrenches that come with the kit. So they give you all the tools basically that you need except for the screwdriver, and that's pretty much it. That's all the tools you need. I like to lay out the parts like this. These are the machine screws for their Allen head, and these are for the frame itself. This is the PSU holder here. I've already loaded it up with the small machine screws and the T-slot nuts, but we'll get to that in a minute, a little bit. These are the 90-degree angle brackets for the bottom portion of the frame, motherboard standoffs, PSU screws, block-off plates, not block-off plates, but end caps. The fan assembly, I've already assembled the fan assembly, but I left these parts off so that we could go through those and how to assemble the fans. But this is pretty much how you want to lay things out, make things really organized. If you get lost, you can always reference the 6-bay Minercase Installation Manual, and that should help you. Always put the fan assembly parts in one location. In this case, I've already assembled the fans, so I just took a couple pieces off so that I can go through the steps of that. And just remember that these little guys here, they're very coarse thread, small screws, just regular Phillips head. These are what you use for your fans, except for the edges that go on the frame, but we'll cover that in a little bit whenever we assemble everything. On the instructions, these are like CK, I think they're called CKA, CKB. Actually, these are CKB. These are what go in between each individual fan, because you're going to have 5 fans. And then this is probably like CKC or something like that. Don't get too wrapped up in the nomenclature though, because we're going to go through it. And once you look at the part, I mean, it doesn't really matter what the name of it is. This is the stacking bracket. I think that they intend on you only using 2 of these, because they only give you 3 in the package. If you look online at parts for this type of kit, this bracket here costs about $5, so that might be why they choose to only use 2, and then maybe give a 3rd one as a I don't know, as a spare, I guess. I don't know. So whenever I was editing this video, I realized that my math was totally off on this. Okay, so each case comes with 2 brackets, but they give you an extra one, so there's 3, and that makes perfect sense, because each case, you're not going to stack one case on top of one case. You're going to have 2 cases. So if there's at least 2 brackets in each case, whether you stack them or not, you'll have enough for stacking them, you know, two per case, so you'll have 4 for each 2 that you stack, which makes perfect sense. So these are the motherboard standoffs. It's part ASG in the instructions, and we'll get to that whenever we install the motherboard. We're going to put them on the case now, but it's more of a part that is required for the actual assembly of all the components on our rig frame. So this is the component that gives people the most trouble. If you look right here, there's like a rough edge or a rough side, knurled edges, whatever you want to call it. That is what goes whenever you have it in the frame, whenever you insert it in the frame. I'm going to go over this in detail here in a little bit, but that's what is, whenever you tighten the screw that's connected here, that's screwed into this nut here, and it pulls it against the frame, so that whatever the device is that you're, or whatever the component is that you're trying to tighten, tightens up. So there's, if you look right here, there's one side of this that is rounded, and the other has like a 90-degree point on it. And the reason for that is whenever it goes into the frame rails, the slot, it goes in there like this, you know, and then as you tighten the screw, as you tighten the machine screw, it spins and it locks in place like that. So that's the way it works. We'll cover that in a lot more detail later. But these are called T-slot nuts. We're going to be using a lot of these short machine screws. These are part number ASA in the instructions, and these are used for the T-slot nuts that I just showed in the last segment there. Here's 2 of them compared. Okay, so you got the short and the long machine screw, and it's a hex head screw, machine screw. This one is ASB in the instructions, and I believe it's for the fans. I always have a lot of these left over. I don't know if they are intending on using these for all the different parts of the fan assembly or what, but there's a lot of them left over. Maybe we'll count them this time to figure it out, but you know, you don't use these, you use the screws that come with the fans, so to secure them to the brackets. So you'll see that in a little bit, but we'll cover that no big deal there. These are the small motherboard and GPU fasteners, machine screws. They're the tiny hex head, and these are used for the motherboard and the GPUs. You'll see that in a little bit. These are the large machine screws. These are for the case itself, and this is part number ASJ in the instructions. And this is a large hex head. Okay, so this is part PKL, I believe, in the instructions. And this is the PSU mounting bracket. It's an acrylic clear. It comes with a paper coating on it that you just peel off. You just you know, pick the edge of it off and then peel it off. This one is a dual bracket. It comes with, this is what comes with the case, so you know, it gives you the opportunity to have two PSUs, two power supply units. Now in our specific case, you know, we've got one server PSU and a regular PSU. The server PSU is not going to be able to easily connect to this, so we're just going to use one side of it, you know, for the regular desktop PSU that we have. And I'll show you in a few minutes why this is already loaded up with some T-slot nuts and the small machine screws. So this is part DKA in the instructions. This is a hard drive mounting bracket. It's also clear acrylic. Comes with the paper on it you have to peel off. And I'll show you how to put that on in a little bit. These are part number ASH, and these are the power supply unit screws. So these go in the power supply unit, and then they slide down inside of the PSU acrylic bracket, and then you tighten it down, right? I'll show you that during the assembly though. Okay, so these are the 90-degree angle brackets that basically connect the bottom piece of the frame to the sides. So we're going to talk more about these once we get to it, but these are going to give you the most trouble as far as assembly goes. I've already got some of them loaded up here. This is what they'll look like. These are the ones that are for the frame itself, or for the bottom frame to connect to the sides. We also have these fan guards, but we're not going to use them for our build. The fans aren't that dangerous, to be honest, so I don't use these. I don't like the way they look. So the frame itself is aluminum. It's anodized. I believe it's called 80-20. I'm not an engineer or anything like that, but I believe that's the name of it. It's 80-20 T-slot aluminum frame. It's 20 millimeter, and which comes out to like 0.79 inches. You know, not a little bit more than 3/4 of an inch wide. It might be made out of 6105 T5 grade aluminum. All that stuff is kind of irrelevant because I mean it's just a rig frame. So something to note here is this is called a counter bore, and this is basically where you're going to want. You'll hear me say throughout the build here that this needs to be on the outside of the frame. So pretty much every connection point where this connects to another part of the frame, you know, you're going to want to have this as where the head of the machine screw is. Let me show you that real quick. So it looks like this. You know, and whenever it goes in there, you want it to be flush like that, right? So just keep that in mind. So the counter bore typically is going to be on the outside, so that you can get to the screw so that you can tighten it, right? Now in some of the pieces there are these mounting holes. These are for the motherboard standoffs, okay? And real quick, this piece has 3 in one end and 2 in the other. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this build here. So now that we have all of our parts laid out and organized in a way that's going to allow us to assemble the frame fairly quickly, there's a couple of other steps to take to prepare for the assembly. The first thing is you're going to want to load up your angle brackets, 4 of them. Okay, so you're going to load 4 of them like this. So you're going to take one of the small, short machine screws, and you're going to put it into the hole there on each side. Well, let's start with the first one. And then you're going to take one of the T-slot nuts, okay? And remember, there's that rough side, the flat side, I guess you could say. and that is the side that you're going to want facing the screw. So you're going to put it on there like that, and you're going to turn it 1.5 to 2 times, okay? That's it, because you need it to be loose, because this part right here is going to fit down inside of the frame. It's going to slide down the rail, okay, or go into the rail like this. So that's important. So 1.5 to 2 turns, and that's it. So let's load up the other side here. Remember that rough side facing the bracket or the screw. 1.5 to 2 turns, and that's it. That's what it's going to look like, and you're going to want to do that to 3 other times, so you're going to have 4 total. You can also go ahead and load up the fan bracket as well, but in this case you're going to use a long machine screw, because this part is much thicker than the other parts that we're going to be assembling. So you just put it in the corner there, and the same thing, rough edge to the screw, right? 1.5 to 2 turns. And that's it. You can also load up your hard drive bracket, your acrylic bracket, the same way. Same procedure, just repeat it again, and you're only going to use the 2 end holes here, because these holes will be used for your hard drive. So load it up the same way, 1.5 to 2 turns. Just like that. And again, for the PSU bracket, we can do the same thing, but this one is kind of a little bit different, because you have this hole here. This is going to be for access to the rig frame machine screw that's going to be in this location whenever you mount this on the frame. So you use this hole, that hole, actually all the other holes except for that one. Obviously this one's too big, so so you just do the same procedure again. Small machine screw in the hole. There is a little bit of something you should know about this particular bracket though, is because you got to think about where you're going to put it and how it needs to, which side the screws need to go in, because just from experience I know that this goes on the back of the frame like this, like this is the side of the frame, so I know that this is the end that is on the frame itself, so the screws need to go in from this direction, because you can't do it like this unless you were going to put it on the other end of the frame, right? So in this case these would be backwards. So there you go. That's how to load it up. The next part that we'll prepare is the this is the GPU mounting frame, or the GPU mounting rail, I guess you could say. It goes on the back of the frame. It's where your GPUs actually connect to, or where you secure them to. And this has on each end you have a T bracket, or I'm sorry, a 90-degree angle bracket, but in this case you only have one side that you load up with the small machine screw and the T-slot nut, okay? So the other side fits in there with a small machine screw, the short one, but it's more of a permanent connection, okay? So it looks kind of like this. I can do this with one hand here. Okay, so you put it on there like that, you line it up to the edge, right? Like this, because this is going to fit down inside the rail, inside the frame. So you just get this to the edge. I don't know if you can see that or not. And then you tighten it up. That's pretty much it for that. On this rail also, what I like to do is just go ahead and put in all the GPU screws, the small silver machine screws. They're the same screws that you use for the motherboard. You got a lot of them in the kit. But I go ahead and just screw them into the rail here, just to be prepared. And then, you know, that way you don't lose them and stuff like that. So then you just have to loosen them a little bit to put the GPU in there. So now there is one piece that the instructions actually leave out. This is a bar that goes between the two FS3 sides of the case. It's as long as the front and the back, but it doesn't have any holes in it. It's just a straight bar. The only holes are in the ends where you connect the, you know, where you screw the machine screw into to connect it between the two sides. Okay, so this is what this bar does, is it supports the rear part of the GPU. I don't know why they didn't include anything in the instructions about this bar. They show it at the end of the instructions, but not during the assembly, so it's kind of weird. But just want you to know that this goes in between of FS03s, and it's to support the rear part of the GPU. So I mean, it does show up in step 6 in the instructions. Now, I wanted to be able to show you something or tell you something about this assembly that wasn't in the instructions, and they made it really simple, really easy on me by leaving this out of the instructions. So there you go. So I got to tell you something that's not in the instructions. So what I like to do is lay the rig frame out, you know, unbox it and lay it out like this, because this is organized in the way that you put it together. So for example, you know, you've got FS2. Let's go over this here. This is the main part right now, the bottom, and then these are the sides. These are the ones that go vertical. Okay, so this is FS2, this is FS5, this is FS6, and this is FS4. This one and FS2 and FS2 over here, the difference between the FS2s and the FS4 is that the FS2s have the motherboard mounting holes in them, right? So just keep that in mind. You'll see you've got the 2 holes and then the 3 holes, right? 2, 3, 2, 3, and each one of these is an FS2. They're interchangeable. So you know, you can't really put the wrong FS2 in the wrong spot unless you don't line up the holes right. 2 towards the outside, closest to the outside, and then 3 on the inside. So you lay out FS02, FS05, FS06, and the 2 long FS7 bars. And you make sure that the bore holes or the counter bore holes are on the outside, like I was saying earlier. So like here's one. You see how this is organized here? So the bore holes are on the outside because that's where our screws are going to be going in from the outside, right? So we're going to need 5 ASJ machine screws that we're going to use to put the bottom of the frame together. So let's grab 5 screws. And then what I like to do is I don't tighten them down all the way initially. So, so it leaves a little bit of slack in there for adjusting and stuff. So. One thing I would like to note too is that the screws come out of the bag. They're pretty oily. They actually include some like white gloves or something with the case. But some people complain about it. I would rather have oil on them because once you you know, you're screwing a metal screw into an aluminum frame, and you know, it can offer a lot of resistance if they don't have a lot of oil on them. So these I've used a couple of times, so they're not really that oily, but just keep that in mind. I'm not letting these bars spin. Remember, you got 2 holes here, 3 holes here, so just keep that in mind too. Don't let them get out of whack on you. Just barely tighten that. Now this is FS06, I think, and it doesn't have any holes in it besides on the end, so that you can put these screws in. Barely tightening them. That was a little bit looser than I would like. Now once you have them all secure with the 5 screws, then you can go back and make sure that everything's, you know, level, that everything's matching up right, and go ahead and give it a pretty good little tightening. You don't have to crank down on it. I wouldn't suggest cranking down on it too much because it is aluminum. So just you know, just a little hand tightness and that's it. That's all you need. A little bit more than finger tight, I guess. Okay, so that's it. So now your bottom piece is already constructed. So now we're going to set the bottom piece aside for now. And let's construct the side pieces. So these vertical bars are the FS01s, and this is the FS02, and this is the FS03. So we're going to start by connecting the FS01s to the FS02, and remember to keep the counter board hole on the outside. So if this is going to be, you know, here's the counter board holes here. So you have to be able to get to the counter bore hole. That's where you want the machine screw to go, right? So you keep them all on the outside. So this is connecting FS01 to FS02. And again, just kind of lightly tighten it just so it doesn't spin on you. We're going to make sure that it's right before we tighten it all the way down. Once you make sure it's flat, then you can go ahead and crank on it just a little bit. So this is FS4, we connected it to FS1s on the ends. So now we're going to take our FS03 with the counter bore hole out, and we're going to connect it to the FS01s. If you make a note here that, you know, these two counter bore holes are opposite of each other, right? Because this one goes across for whatever piece that was. I think it was FS06 maybe, and that's what your PSU is going to sit on. So it's just a bar that runs this way, right? So let's go ahead and tighten these up. I like to lay it down flat before I tighten them up. Make sure all the square pieces are aligned properly. Alright, we're going to lay that down like this. And then we're going to assemble the other side the same way. So remember, this one is FS04 because it's on the left hand side of your case. So on the right hand side, we've got FS02, which has the two motherboard standoff mounting holes and the three, right? So we got to remember that's the way it's oriented, because that's how where the motherboard standoffs are going to be. So this is at the bottom, here and here. Remember, counter bore holes on the outside. So let's put this one together. Actually, this has got to turn like this because you want them on the top, right? So whenever you stand it up, it will be on the top. Once you make sure it's nice and flat, you make sure that you tighten it up. See, that's not really level. Just loosen it back up a little bit here. And leave it on the table to tighten it. It should be good. Yeah. So now this is a FS03, I think, right? Counter bore hole on the outside. Okay, so now you have your two sides built, just like that. We are deviating from the instructions by connecting this FSO3 bar here this early in the assembly, but I found that it's just easier to do it this way than to wait and do it later. And you'll see why in just a little bit. But we are deviating from the instructions that are included with the case. So now what we're going to do is we're going to attach the unnamed rear GPU bar to the two FSO3 bars, okay? And this just makes things a little bit easier on the assembly of the bottom part to the sides, okay? So now we're ready to attach the top to the bottom of the frame. So you essentially have two main pieces now. You've got the top and then you've got the bottom. And up until now it's been pretty simple for the installation, but this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because what we're going to do, we're going to set the top aside for a second. We're going to flip the bottom over. Okay, remember 2 holes here, 3 holes here. So we're going to flip the bottom over so that we can attach the 90-degree angle brackets that we had from before, right? This is what we're going to be using. And what we want to do is, you have to, these are for each corner. So this is a corner, that's a corner, you know, like this. So what we're going to do is, this is where I get to show you how these things work here. You're going to have this as the angle that holds the top to the bottom. Now this is the bottom, so we're going to slide. I mean, you could put it in here like this too, but if you just turn the T-slot nut sideways and let it go fit into the rail, then what you're going to do, whenever you tighten it, whenever you spin the machine nut to tighten it up, that T-nut inside there is going to spin. Okay, so you want to have this lined up, you know, with the edge here, like that. So the T-slot nut in there has spun, and now it's secure, right? Because it's gripping the inside of the rail. So we're just going to repeat that on each corner. And you kind of want to make sure you look down inside there and make sure that it did spin. Like this one doesn't look like it spun all the way here. Sometimes they don't spin all the way, and it's okay if they don't spin the entire way around. This one actually did not. Maybe I can show you how it works here. So see how it's not spinning all the way? So what you can do in those instances, sometimes just flipping it around and using another side, sometimes that'll help. It's just not wanting to spin all the way. Now what you could do is just go ahead and spin it yourself, right? Sideways, and whenever it goes in the channel, you just leave it like that, right? Something like that. And then you just gotta kind of hope that it spins, or that it stays like that. go. That's a good one there. So now we got all four of them on. I'm looking at that one. That one's good. This one needs some work. So we'll spin that one manually here. Now that one's good. This one didn't spin all the way either. So, you know, you don't really have to worry about this that much, to be honest. As long as it's gripping pretty good on the inside. You know, even if it's like a, I don't even know how you would explain it, maybe like a half turned, you know, inside there, you should be okay. It's not gonna, as long as it's gripping pretty well, you'll be fine. But since we're doing this, I want to go ahead and make sure that they're all spun correctly in there. So there you go. I mean, you don't want it to fall apart like if you try to move it one day or something. So just so you have a better understanding or a clear understanding of how this works, I figured I would show you with this clear piece, you know, for the hard drive mounting, how these T-slot nuts and the screw and the rail, the T-slot groove here, and how this actually works, how they go together. So, you know, if it's like this, then obviously it won't fit in there. But if you spin it, let it slide down inside the channel, and as long as you only have 1.5 to 2 turns on here, let me loosen this up just a little bit, then it'll be fine. As long as it goes down underneath of into the channel. So as long as it goes underneath this part right here, then you should be good. So if you lay it in there like that, this should show you really well how it spins. Hopefully it spins. There you go, boom. See how that works? So it grips the underside of the groove, and that's how it stays put. So now we're going to connect the top to the bottom pieces. We're going to flip this back over. Actually, what we'll do is we'll lay this down. Okay, so we got to make sure that you know which way is front, which way is back. So just remember that this bar, this unnamed bar that's in between the two side pieces, goes towards the front of the case. The back of the GPUs are here, and you know, the power, all that stuff comes up through here. So we're going to lay it down like this. Then, let's see here. So we have to get that T-slot nut inside of the channel, right? Remember? And slide it up. And we need to feed each corner into the track. Okay? So you gotta get each one to go into the track. It probably would be better to get one of them secured, at least partially. But what you're looking at here is to have the center of this rail here lined up with the bolt hole, because that'll put you in the center on the side. So because it's going to slide either way, you know, and go up and down, you got to kind of have a reference to line it up with. So that's what we use, is that we just try to center it on that bolt. And then we're going to tighten it a little bit. Hoping our T-slot nut spins in there. It didn't. So we have to, if that happens, you have to loosen it back up, you know. What we'll probably do is try to feed it in there manually. That. And I'm noticing that this bracket is a little bit off. This is definitely the tricky part. So because that's tightening, I know that the T-slot nut in there is spinning. So I'm lining it up with, I'm looking at the top of it here and lining up this bolt hole, or this bolt, with the center of the rod here, or the center of the frame. And that's where I'm going to tighten it. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this one up pretty well, so that hopefully the other ones are easier. Alright. Just repeat the same thing on the other ones. Alright, so sorry about that. I had to go and take this side apart because I had actually used the wrong piece. I had swapped this piece with this piece down here, so it didn't go together right, and that was giving me a lot of fits. So whenever you're putting your frame together, make sure that the space here is the same on both sides, right? Whenever you're looking at this piece here, whenever this is in the box and it comes out of the box, these pieces are labeled, you know, it's got like a wrapper on it. But I had already assembled this frame once, so whenever I'm doing this again, I'm doing it without the numbers, and you know, basically no paperwork. This particular piece looks a lot like this one. You know, the only difference is the spacing of the bore hole from the end. So just make sure you have the one with the closer, with the less amount of space here, and don't get those backwards. So that was giving me a lot of fits because things were not lining up right. Okay, now they're all tightened up. You kind of want to test it to make sure it's level. I'm going to go ahead and install the end caps so we don't damage our table anymore. Okay, it's not level, so I'm gonna loosen up basically everything. Loosen up all the frame rails and see what we can come up with. So you might have to mess around with it a little bit, loosen up some of the bolts or screws, and you know, maybe even loosen up some of the angle brackets sometimes to get it to level out, you know, because as you're putting it together, if things aren't lined up exactly right, you know, it might get a little bit bound up. So you kind of have to just pay attention to that, and you know, you might have to loosen things up just a little bit to, oh, that one's still loose, and just make sure it's still level. Looks good. Check it all out. Go back over all the screws. Okay, so that should be good. So now we're going to move this out of the way for a second, and we're going to look at assembling our fans. So the way I do this, So I've already done a little bit of work here. Pretty simple. The small ones are what hold each fan together, right? And then the end pieces, you know, you kind of have to look at it, and it's you know, rounded. So you would put, you know, match it up with the edge of the fan. And again, like this piece could be used over here too, right? So you just kind of have to look at it and say, okay, this fits like that, right? And you also got to imagine the fan shroud on here, because you know, the fan shroud would go here, or the is it shroud? Is that what it's called? Whatever. So that would go here. So basically, just start at one end, and you know, put the brackets on one, and then you just work your way over like this. And these are the very coarse thread small screws for fans. Come with the fans, not with the case. And these fans are actually optional. I mean, you don't have to put them on. If you don't need them, you know, you don't have to. One thing I'll note too is don't torque these very much, because they are just going into plastic. So just kind of be a little bit gentle. Don't have to put a lot of force into it. You can see I'm just kind of using my fingers, and that's it. As long as it's tight, it should be good. Round it like this. Okay, and that's pretty much it for that part. You say it's a little flimsy, but once you get it on there, on the frame, it'll be fine. The next step is to put the machine screws with the T-slot nut, right? Because this is going to go on the front of the frame, so it has to have this T-slot and machine screw assembly. Now these are the longer machine screws, not the short ones. So just put that in the hole. One and a half to 2 turns, right? And there you go. So now we're going to pick up the frame and put the fans on it. So now I got the fan assembly here. I've got my machine screws with the T-slot nuts. I always put the power cable down in the bottom part of the fan, like this. And then another thing to note is the airflow is from here through there. So you know, you should have the cool air blowing onto your GPUs from this direction. So you don't want to put the fans on backwards, is what I'm saying. So make sure you know which way your fans you know, are blowing the airflow in the fan. These are pretty easy because they're LED ring fans. So like the ring with the LED goes on the outside. Pretty simple. A couple of ways of doing it. You can either put it on there like this, you know, and then spin the machine screws and get the T-slot nuts to go in there and then spin it, or you can start at the top, you know, kind of set them up already, preload them, and slide it down in there like that. It's kind of easier this way because that way you know that you got it, you know, and you got to do the other side too at the same time, actually. Like that. That looks pretty good. And you want to just peek down in there and make sure that they're spinning, you know, that they're getting secure. You gotta leave a little bit of room in the top because of the end cap that you're going to put on there. But that is pretty much it for building this frame. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stack them. So that'll be the next thing.
So there it is, the mining rig frame is built, and now it's just waiting on us to install the components and get this thing up and running, and we're going to do that in the next video. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.